Welcome on the second video lecture on basics of Indian accounting standards. In the first video lecture, we have learnt about the meaning of convergence, how Ind AS is different from IFRS, what is the meaning of carve out, carve ins and removal of options. Then we have learnt the applicability and roadmap of Ind AS for various class of companies. So friends, in this lecture, we are going to discuss about the different Ind AS, that is 40 Ind AS notified, and their counterpart standards under or guidance given under existing Indian GAAP. We all know that India has been converged to IFRS. So Ind AS are the Indian version of IFRS. So coming to the IFRS versus Ind AS literature, since we do not have adopted IFRS, so we have converged IFRS, which is known as the Ind AS, Indian Accounting Standards. So looking into the IFRS literature, so under global standards, there are some IFRS standards like IFRS 1 to IFRS 14. So international financial reporting standards are those standards which have been issued by IASB, that is International Accounting Standard Board, after 2001. So in parallel to IFRS 1 to IFRS 14, we have notified Ind AS 101 to Ind AS 114. So in place of IFRS 1, like IFRS 1 talks about first time adoption of IFRS, and Ind AS 101 is replica of IFRS 1, which is known as first time adoption of Ind AS. IFRS 2 talks about share based payments, like Ind AS 102 also talks about share based payment. So we have maintained the series same as in sequence of IFRS. So coming to IAS, that is International Accounting Standards. So International Accounting Standards are those standards which are issued by the predecessor committee of IASB, that is known as International Accounting Standard Committee, and revised by IASB. So earlier, from 1973 to 2001, International Accounting Standard Committee has issued some international standards which is known as International Accounting Standards. So post 2001, when IASB took over on IASC, the standards, some of the standards are revised by IASB, and some of the old standards were demised, and in place of those standards, new standards under heading IFRS has been issued. So as of now, the total 41 standard has been issued by IASC, that is IAS 1 to IAS 41. And between those 41 standards, some of the standards has been demised. So in comparison to IAS 1 to IAS 41, we have notified and issued Ind AS 1 to Ind AS 41. So we'll discuss in the next slide. So apart from IFRS standard and international accounting standards, there are some interpretations also. IFRIC interpretation and SIC interpretations. So SIC interpretation is interpretation issued by the Standing Interpretation Committee, that is up to 2001. And IFRIC interpretations are issued by International Financial Reporting Standard Interpretation Committee. So these interpretations have been issued after 2001. So in place of those interpretations, we have included these interpretation in the form of appendix. Let's say Ind AS 16 property, plant and equipment. So IFRIC 1. So IFRIC 1 talks about decommissioning cost. So in place of IFRIC 1, we have included Appendix 1 to Ind AS 16. So all the interpretations have been incorporated at the last of the Ind AS standards in the name of Appendix. Now coming to have a discussion on one by one on the Ind AS standards notified as of date. So Ind AS 1 talks about presentation of financial statement. So the global standard is IAS 1, which talks about presentation of financial statement. And under our existing Indian GAAP, there is Accounting Standard 1, which talks about disclosure of accounting policies. So coming to Ind AS 2, which talks about inventories. So IAS 2 also talks about inventories, and we have Accounting Standard 2, which is on inventories. So after 1 and 2, directly there is a Ind AS 7. So what is the difference between 2 and 7? So where these 3, 4, 5 and 6 has gone? So under the global scenario, as I have already told you, IAS 3, IAS 4, IAS 5, IAS 6 has already been demised, and in place of those 4 global standards, those 4 international standards, some new IFRS has been issued. So since globally there is no IAS 3, 4, 5, 6, so maintaining the same sequence, we have also not notified 3, 4, 5, 6. So Ind AS 7 talks about statement of cash flows, and IAS 7 is on the same lines, talks about statement of cash flows, and AS 3 is on cash flow statement. Coming to Ind AS 8, parallel to IAS 8, which talks about accounting policies, changes in accounting estimates and errors, and we have accounting standard 5 under our existing regime. Ind AS 10, which talks about events occurring after the reporting period, so same as of IAS 10, and we have accounting standard 4 in our existing regime. So Ind AS 11 talks about construction contracts. So IAS 11 is also talks about construction contracts, and we have accounting standard 7 on construction contracts. So Ind AS 12, in the same lines of IAS 12, is on income taxes, and we have IAS 22 on income taxes. So after Ind AS 12, there is no 13, 14, 15, 16 because there is no IAS 13, 14, 15. There is no IAS 13, 14, 15. So after IAS 12, there is a directly IAS 16. So maintaining the same sequence of IAS 16, we have Ind AS 16, which talks about property, plant and equipment, and the comparable standard in our existing regime is accounting standard 10. The title of the accounting standard 10 has also been revised and amended, while notification dated 30th March 2016 and AS 6 has been deleted. Now there is only AS 10, which talks about accounting for fixed assets, and the nomenclature or title is property, plant and equipment. So Ind AS 17 talks about leases, same as of IAS 17, and accounting standard 19 also talks about leases. So under Ind AS 17, we have taken a carve out. Ind AS 18, same as of IAS 18, is on revenue. So we have AS 9 on revenue recognition. Ind AS 19 as well as IAS 19 talks about employee benefits, and we have AS 15 on employee benefits. Ind AS 20 talks about accounting for government grants and disclosure of government assistance like IAS 20. We have AS 12 on accounting for government grants. Ind AS 21 and IAS 21 talks about effect of changes in foreign exchange rates, and we have AS 11 which talks about effects of changes in foreign exchange rates. Ind AS 22 is not there because globally IAS 22 is not there. So Ind AS 23 as well as IAS 23 talks about borrowing cost, and accounting standard 16 in our existing regime talks about borrowing cost. Ind AS 24 and IAS 24 talks about related party disclosure, and we have AS 18 on related party disclosures. Ind AS 27 separate financial statements. So like IAS 17, this is a new standard, and the comparable standard under existing Indian GAAP is not there. So Ind AS 27 separate financial statements. So this standard is applicable to those entities which are required to prepare and present standalone financial statement in addition to consolidated financial statement. So Ind AS 28, like IAS 28, talks about investment in associates and joint ventures. So we have accounting standard 23 which talks about investment in associates, and accounting standard 27 which talks about accounting for investment in joint ventures. So again, Ind AS 29 is a new standard for which guidance was not there in existing standard. So like IAS 29, Ind AS 29 is on financial reporting in hyperinflationary economies. We do not have such a standard in our existing regime. Ind AS 32, so 3031 is not there because IAS 3031 has been demised. Ind AS 32 talks about presentation of financial instruments like IAS 32. So we do not have any notified standard on financial instruments. So AS 30, 31, 32 were never get mandatory, were never notified. So there is a guidance note issued by ICAI in May 2015 which talks about accounting for derivative contracts. Ind AS 33 is on earning per share like IAS 33, and we have AS 20. Ind AS 34 talks about interim financial reporting in comparison to IAS 34, and we have accounting standard 25 on interim financial reporting. IAS 36 globally and Ind AS 36 for India talks about impairment of assets, like we have AS 28 on impairment of assets. Ind AS 37 and IAS 37 talks about provisions, contingent liability and contingent assets. We have AS 29. So Ind AS 38 talks about intangible assets. Globally it is IAS 38, and under Indian GAAP it was accounting standard 26. So Ind AS 40 and IAS 40 talks about investment property. So there is no specific standard for investment property under Indian GAAP. So AS 13, which is on accounting for investment, talks about investment property. Ind AS 41 is altogether a new standard for India. So in comparison to IAS 41, we do not have any guidance on accounting for agriculture. No notified standard is there under existing Indian GAAP. So Ind AS 101 is again a new standard, first time adoption of Ind AS, like IFRS 1, which is first time adoption of IFRS. So there is no such standard in our existing Indian GAAP regime. Ind AS 102 talks about share-based payments like IFRS 2, but under Indian GAAP there was no notified standard on share-based payment. There was a guidance note issued by ICAI on accounting for employee share-based payments. Ind AS 103 talks about business combination in parallel to IFRS 3. We have accounting standard 14 which talks about accounting for amalgamation. So there is a carve out which we have incorporated in Ind AS 103 also in comparison to IFRS 3. Ind AS 104 talks about insurance contracts. We do not have any standard under existing Indian regime. Ind AS 105 talks about non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operation in parallel to IFRS 5. So we have under existing Indian regime accounting standard 24 which talks about discontinued operation, and for non-current asset held for sale the tangible asset portion is included in AS 10 property plant and equipment, and the intangible asset non-current asset held for sale has been incorporated in AS 26. So there is no specific standard for non-current assets held for sale. Ind AS 106 in parallel to IFRS 6 talks about exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources. Under existing Indian GAAP there is no notified standard. There is a guidance note issued by ICAI which is on accounting for oil and gas producing activities. Ind AS 107 talks about disclosure of financial instruments in comparison to IFRS 7. Ind AS 108 talks about segment reporting. Globally it is IFRS 8. So in our regime it is AS 17. Ind AS 109 talks about financial instruments, classification, recognition, derecognition, impairment and measurement. So in comparison to IFRS 9. So India was the first country which has been adopted IFRS 9, that is converged Ind AS 10 converged IFRS 9 first in the world. So we have only accounting for derivative contracts in our Indian GAAP. Ind AS 110 talks about consolidated financial statements in parallel to IFRS 10. We have AS 21 which talks about consolidated financial statement. Ind AS 111 talks about joint arrangements in comparison to IFRS 11. We have AS 27 which talks about accounting for investment in joint ventures. Ind AS 112 talks about disclosure of interest in other entities. So there is no specific standard under Indian regime. So this standard caters the disclosure requirement of investment in associates, joint venture and subsidiaries. So the disclosure of Ind AS 28, Ind AS 110, Ind AS 111 is given in Ind AS 112. Under Indian regime, under Indian GAAP, the disclosure requirement has been incorporated in AS 21 which is on consolidation, AS 23 which is on associates, and AS 27 which is on joint ventures. So again Ind AS 113 is once again a new standard which is on fair value measurement. There was no notified standard under existing Indian GAAP regime. Ind AS 114 talks about regulatory deferral accounts in parallel to IFRS 14. We have a guidance note issued by ICAI under Indian regime which talks about accounting for rate regulated activities. So as of now total 40 standards have been notified by notification dated 16th February 2015 and March 30th 2016. So quickly recap again. So there are some brand new standards, or there are some new standards in Ind AS which were not available under Indian GAAP, like Ind AS 27 on separate financial statement, Ind AS 29 on financial reporting in hyperinflationary economies, Ind AS 32 which talks about presentation of financial instruments, Ind AS 41 which talks about agriculture, Ind AS 101 on first time adoption of Ind AS, Ind AS 102 which is on share based payments, although standard was not available but guidance note was available under the old regime, Ind AS 104 on insurance contracts, Ind AS 106 exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources. So again standard was not available but guidance note was available. Ind AS 107 financial instrument disclosure, Ind AS 109 financial instrument, again standard was not available, but guidance note, that is accounting for derivative contracts, was issued by the ICAI under old regime. Ind AS 112 disclosure of interest in other entities, 113 fair value measurement, 114 regulatory deferral accounts. So these were the brand new standards, or I can say that new standards, which is notified under Ind AS and for which there was no notified standards under Indian GAAP. Thank you. I hope this video is useful for you. Thank you.